This is Dr. Maddy Roth with Roth Consulting Group, and today I have a friend on here, Michelle Wall, and she is in my first coaching cohort. She's the owner of Moms in Motion PT, and I'll kind of let you start off. Tell us about your business and what made you want to get started with that.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited and honored to be here. So, as Maddy said, my name is Michelle Wall, and I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist and the owner of Moms in Motion PT. I'm a wife and a mom of two girls. They're ages 4.5 and 2.5. So, with running a business and having them, I'm a very busy person, but it's a lot of fun too, and both are extremely rewarding. So, I'm really happy to kind of be in the place that I am in life. My plan for owning a business was not really thought out and wasn't really a plan at all. Our older daughter was born March 1st, 2020, which was, everyone knows what was happening right then or soon thereafter. And so I actually delayed going back to work by like a month and a half after she was born. And I was working in an outpatient clinic in downtown Minneapolis. I live in Minnesota, and delayed things. I had talked to her pediatrician and talked to my OBGYN, and they both kind of recommended, if you can stay out of the clinics a little bit longer where you're like with people all the time, that feels a little bit risky. And she had actually had an infection and had to be hospitalized for 12 days. So she felt like a little more fragile anyways. So delayed my going back. And then when I was planning to go back, I actually got laid off and my clinic eventually shut down. So I didn't have a job. And at that point, I was really enjoying being home with my daughter and couldn't really imagine going back to a full-time job. So I just kind of got to thinking what would allow me to spend time with her, but also make some money and more than like cover the cost of childcare. Childcare is so expensive. It wouldn't really make sense to just work a part-time job where I wasn't making much or like barely covering it. Then I'm like, why wouldn't I just stay home with her then? But I really wanted to use my hard-earned skills that, I went to school for a long time to become a physical therapist and really love being a physical therapist. And so I wasn't really ready to hang that up after, I hadn't been in my career very long. So I took a leap and started out on my own. And at first, I didn't really know what I was doing, but with a lot of guidance and several coaches along the way, I kind of got my footing, and here we are. So we're going. I guess I forgot to say too, Moms in Motion PT is a mobile clinic. So we do all of our treatments in our patients' homes around the Twin Cities. And if people are too far outside of our radius, we do offer virtual services as well.
So that was one of the things when I was deciding if you were going to be in our cohort or not. I was like, I'm not taking any mobile practices. I was like, no. But then I got to know Michelle, and you'll get to know her on this podcast episode. And I'm like, oh, I have to have this girl in this group. Like, you're so motivated and have a really strong faith. And I just thought that was so cool. So yeah. So when you were working at that other practice, were you doing pelvic health there, or when did you get into pelvic?
Yeah, good question. No, I was not. It was just outpatient orthopedics, and I had a pretty robust pelvic health unit in school compared to what I've heard from a lot of people. She was a private practice owner who came in as an adjunct professor to teach our stuff. And so I feel like we just had a little bit different take on it. And I was really interested in pelvic in school. I was like, oh, that's so cool. But not really for me. But then after my daughter was born, I was like, okay, I'm gonna, get back into exercise. I lift weights, I'm a runner. And I was like, okay, I know the principles of rehab because I'm a physical therapist, and kind of thought that like I knew some stuff. And I was like, oh man, this is a lot harder than I expected. And my body is just so different. And I felt like if I'm feeling lost and don't know what to do, like I can't imagine like the average woman who doesn't have physical therapy school behind her and just feeling so lost. And so that's kind of what got me into the pelvic realm. And of course, like at that time, I was planning to go back to my outpatient job. So I wasn't really thinking like, oh, I want to switch. But then when I lost my job, I was kind of like, okay, fresh slate. And actually in January, so I started kind of getting things going with my business in late 2020. And then in the beginning of 2021, I started seeing patients. But in the meantime, early January, I actually had a miscarriage. And it was actually my experience with the medical system that really like pushed me into pelvic health. And when I tell this story every time, I'm like, oh, I feel so kind of dumb saying this because I know the medical system that we live in today, and I know that it's not great. We've got a lot of issues with it. So I don't really know what I expected, but I didn't have any follow up with my provider. I was actually out of state when it happened. And so my communication was all through my chart. And it was like through a nurse who relayed information from my doctor saying, it's probably nothing you did. Wait a couple cycles before trying again. And that was it. And so I was kind of like, whoa, this is what our healthcare system is doing for women. And I know that I'm not working in that precise area, but I felt like at that point I was like, I have to do something to better care for women. And so it was kind of that really propelled me into like, well, if I do pelvic health, like that is a facet of women's health that I can really make an impact on. And that's really kind of what got me excited about doing social media too. Cause I had started my account and kind of got things rolling, but then I was like, this is what it's about. I want to help women know that there's other options out there for them for a lot of these like issues that they're dealing with that they hear from either the medical community or their other mom friends like, oh haha, this is funny, I pee my pants now, or like, oh, can't jump on the trampoline anymore because I'll pee my pants. And those aren't funny things. Like that really impacts your life. And so that just got me really passionate about educating women through social media and some other means, as well as taking care of moms with my practice.
Yeah, I love that. It just made me think of this text my friend sent me this week, and it was a screenshot of what her doctor told her. She had a C-section, and her doctor said, oh, usually we don't send people to pelvic floor therapy after a C-section unless they're having issues like pain with sex or things like that. And I'm just like, oh, it's just so frustrating. And we've come a long way, but it's really bad. And I think a lot of these OB offices really are struggling because they're tied a little bit by insurance companies and can't
Mm-hmm.
treat how they want to treat as well, even if the providers are really good. But yeah, so was your first pelvic health patient your first mobile patient as well, like in your business?
No, I had kind of started marketing myself and had a website and everything before I was really like full on pelvic health. And so I think my first patient was just like, it was a hip patient. And then I think an ankle one was my second. So just a little bit orthopedic there. Yeah. Then once I kind of started changing my messaging, the pelvic patients started kind of rolling in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of how it was for me too. Ortho background, and then took Carmen Wallace, and my first pelvic health patient was basically like my first patient in my business. And it was like, yeah, I can treat your leakage.
Yeah.
Sure. I've never done it before, but let's do this. And somehow, by some miracle, people are still getting better today. So, okay,
Yeah.
so I think the cool thing about Michelle is she she's running a mobile business and she's totally owning it. I know a lot of people they start mobile and then they'll get a brick and mortar practice, but Michelle's got a mobile practice and she has employees, and she's kind of dove right into that mobile world. So what made you, or what are the perks of being mobile, and what are the cons of being mobile? And tell us the story
Yeah.
of mobile life.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of funny that when I tell people I'm mobile, like if it's another practice owner, their next question is almost always like, "Oh, do you think you'll get a brick and mortar location?" And I'm like, "No, I don't." And so it feels like it's a lot of people like start mobile because it's less of a risk, and it is because you're not having to pay rent, so there's a lot less overhead. And it actually worked out really nicely for me to start that way because, like I said, I started like right in the middle of the pandemic. And so I didn't like know the first thing about renting a space. I didn't like know of anyone. I didn't even know who to ask about that. And so it wasn't really on my radar to like get a space at that point. But actually starting out mobile at that point in time worked out really nicely because a lot of the clinics around me, which is why I lost my job in the first place, like patients weren't coming in anymore, whether that was because they're not going to their jobs, so it just wasn't convenient or whatever. I felt like that would have been weird to like lose my job at a clinic and all these clinics are laying off people around me and then be like, I'm going to start a clinic. So I was like, well, I'm going to do mobile. And then I think people will be more receptive to it because, you know, I was masking, they were masking, I was just going into the house and there's this exposure to one person. So that actually worked out really nicely for me because everyone's like, oh, was it hard to start during COVID? And I was like, well, yes, to a point, but also it was kind of a good start because I was mobile. People were receptive to that and were fine with me coming into their home. And especially like some of them were a little bit more cautious and we masked for like a longer period of time, but people really liked that I was coming to their homes. And then kind of once I really niched down into I'm going to work with pelvic health and really specifically pregnancy and postpartum, it made sense to be mobile. And now that's who we are. We come to your home and that's the clientele that are seeking us out because a lot of our patients are busy moms and they're either stay-at-home moms or they're working from home. We do have some that go into the office, but a lot of people are like hybrid. So they'll fit us in either like right before their workday, they'll finish up early, or they'll do their lunch break if they're a working mom. And if they're a stay-at-home mom, a lot of times they'll try to schedule their appointments when their older kids, like their toddlers, are doing like rest time or nap time or something. So it really just works for the population that we're seeing. And I can't tell you how many times when people have called in, they'll say like, oh, I tried pelvic PT, but I only went to one appointment because I just couldn't make it, or, you know, just, and I think that the population, like working with moms, I think we tend to like bend over backwards for everyone else in our family, and you know we'll do whatever we can to like drive our kids to various appointments, but they don't necessarily put forth that same effort to take care of their own selves. And so to take the time to, you know, get everyone strapped in the car and whatever, get to their appointment, spend the time of the appointment, and then get everyone home, or have to find childcare for their kids, is just a big barrier. And it's not impossible, but I find that a lot of people just aren't willing to do that to take care of themselves. So it really just works for the population that we're seeing for us to just come to their home. And of course, there are challenges. Commute times are really challenging. We're in a really big metro area, which is nice because there's, you know, lots of people that need help. But and that's part of the reason that I've grown my team and I'm looking to grow even more, to be able to decrease the commute times as we kind of make people's radius a little bit smaller for how long they're having to drive. When I was on my own, you know, I was driving literally all over the metro, and I had kind of said like, oh, I have a 20-mile radius, but then, you know, I'm just getting started. So I'm kind of saying yes to everybody. And then I was driving like 45 minutes in one direction sometimes, and then you can't get back. And so the way that we structure things, we have an hour visit and then 30 minutes in between each visit for drive time. And so we really try to prioritize minimal commute times to make sure that we can get from patient to patient. But of course, that's a challenge in and of itself. And then just that we're spending a lot of time in the car throughout the day in between patients, so we just can't see as many patients volume wise as we could in a clinic, seeing back-to-back patients.
Michelle has one pelvic PT on staff, is working on bringing another on. How does that work? Are you and your staff in the same area, or do you guys serve like a little different area based on where your employees live?
Yeah, we serve different areas. So I was kind of looking, it wasn't going to be like a deal breaker if they lived in a certain spot, but they would probably still have to be willing to serve a certain area so that we're not, again, it's more about the commutes. And so she's kind of, the way that it's split up, there's a river that kind of runs through Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so she kind of sees everyone north and west of the river, and I see everyone east and south of the river.
Okay, cool. So would you recommend to business owners to do the mobile model, or what would be your recommendation for that?
Yeah, I think you have to just kind of weigh what your goals are in a business to see if that would be a good fit. Like I said, a lot of people kind of start out mobile because it's a little bit lower risk. And then once they get busy enough, they're like, okay, I'm gonna, find a space. And I think that's an okay thing. Like I said, we kind of were like, this is it. This is what we are. And so our messaging is such that like even our logo, I don't know if you've seen our logo, but it's like a location pin with like a mom and a kid running. And so that was like kind of twofold, like mom's in motion, like they're moving, but also like the location pin, like we come to you. And so everything was kind of tied together, like this is the model that we're going for. And so I think if someone likes that idea and they're like, oh yeah, we want to serve people in their home, I want to be this like concierge, can't even say that word, but PT, then I think go for it. But I'd say if you are planning to own a brick and mortar someday or rent space, then just don't make that like your full messaging that like, oh, we come to you. Like, of course you can say that, beginning out, but don't make it your full thing if you have other plans. Cause then I feel like you kind of have to backtrack and like, okay, who are we and what are we doing? So I'd just say, look at your priorities before you start and see if that is something that you're really passionate about. Like, are you passionate about going to people's homes? Because I certainly am, not only for the convenience of my patients, but, you get a lot of clues and get to see a lot about their life by just looking at their home environment too. You can see like, okay, are things really clean? Do they seem like they're kind of this like type A, I have to do everything kind of personality? Or is everything like super messy and they look like they're, running ragged, super overwhelmed, just not holding things together, or somewhere in between? I've had patients that they would like stress vacuum like for 10 minutes before I'd come over and I'd see the vacuum lines in the carpet. And I was like, you don't have to vacuum for me. Like, I don't care. And she's like, well, there's chip crumbs all over the carpet. And I'm like, I don't care about your chip crumbs. Like, I care about you and like do something for yourself, And so I loved it. One day I came over and she goes, hey, I just want you to know that I didn't vacuum today. Instead, I went for a 10-minute walk before you got here. And I was like, I'm so proud of you. Like, that is great. And so I just think there's a lot that we can glean from the home environment too, which is cool. So if you're passionate about it, I say go for it.
As a mobile practice owner, do you find it offensive when other practice owners ask you, like, do you plan to go brick and mortar eventually? Is that kind of like how we get the question, like, oh, well, when you get bigger, are you going to take insurance? Like, I've had so many people ask me that, and that drives me nuts. Like, is it the same thing or not really?
I mean, I don't feel offended by it just because I think it's more common for people to start out that way and then move to brick and mortar. So I just feel like people know it as kind of like the next move. So no, I don't think it's offensive, but I get what you're saying, but I don't feel offended personally by it. But I could see that people would get offended.
Yeah, I never know, because even when I talked to you on the phone the first time, I was like, I don't know if it's like appropriate to ask this, but I really trying to know like what your vision is and stuff. So yeah, I just kind of asked it. But what are 3 mistakes you've made so far in running your business? It's kind of a hard question to think on the spot. But.
Yeah, I would say the first one was, I guess, like not getting coaching right away. I mean, as soon as someone brought it to my attention, they were like, do you have a business coach? And I was like, nope. And he's like, you need one. And I was like, okay. But I didn't really even know that was a thing, that like business coaches for PTs owning cash practices. I didn't know that was even something to like be looking for. And so I had kind of started and I had some other relationships. I worked at a chiropractic office for my first job. And a lot of the chiropractors who worked there it was kind of a teaching model. And so they had a lot of them gone out on their own and started their own clinics. So I was like, okay, I'm going to network with them and I'll get this going. But like nothing actually happened in the beginning when I was like first like trying. And so as soon as that one was like, you need a business coach, I was like, okay. So then I started working with a business coach and that was like the best thing I could have done. So I guess and a lot of people in my group at the time hadn't actually started yet. They were like starting business coaching to kind of plan and like get things all in a line before they open their doors. And I was like, oh, that would have been like really helpful. But again, with mobile, it wasn't like super risky. It's not like I was paying rent somewhere and like, oh, I have no patience, I can't cover my overhead. But like, I wish I had known that there were resources out there for me to get going a little bit smoother in the beginning. But again, it's kind of you don't know what you don't know kind of a thing. So I guess that was probably like the biggest mistake.
You said to me one time that, I don't know, you wish you had more of a plan for training new staff or a better way to do it, like with people. That's like kind of the tricky part too with staff. Like you can't be there every second to ask like a quick question, and I don't know.
Yes, no, that's a great point. Yes, I would say that again, you're kind of figuring it out as you go when you're like doing a new thing each step of the way in business. And so that is something that I plan to do very different this next time around with hiring is training the staff and just clearly laying out expectations ahead of time. And I'm building in one-on-one time with me for new staff members, including my patient care coordinator who I just hired, because I think that with mobile and having staff, it can feel like, okay, we're all just kind of doing our own thing, but we're not really part of a team. And I really want that like team culture. And I want people to feel like they're part of a team and not like they're kind of out isolated doing their own thing. And so that's something that I'm building in for future staff is to have a little bit more mentorship time and more just staff time together to feel like we're a part of a team. And then I guess the last mistake would just be I wish I had hired a patient care coordinator sooner. And I feel like I've heard that from so many practice owners. And I was always kind of like, oh, yeah, that sounds really nice. But once I actually pulled the plug and I did it, I was like, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. So if you are on the fence about hiring one, you should do it.
Yes. It's the best money you'll ever spend. And
Yeah.
I mean, the people we hire are, at least as far as I know, they're really happy to have a job like this. And I'm just so happy to not have to deal with the phones. Like, it's just amazing. So, and I know a
Yeah.
lot of practice owners, like, I mean, the hardest part, I think, when I was first starting is like having those conversations on the phone and like stating my pricing and stuff. And it feels, I think, more intense when you're the one that's deciding what the prices are. Whereas like staff, it's like, this is what it always has been. Like, I don't know anything different. This is what it is. Like, it wasn't my decision. So I think it's just sometimes easier for a staff member to have those conversations in a way. Um,
Yeah. And I think it's good to like have reps on the phone so that you know what it feels like to talk to patients and you kind of heard maybe some of the objections or different things that patients are saying on the phone so you can give good advice. So I do think it's valuable to have answered the phones. That's definitely something that I'm glad to like have off of my plate.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's super helpful. So, man, my brain is going in a million directions, but yeah, I think it's just really cool that your inception, is that the word, inception of your business was like kind of your kids in a way, like really drove that. And I think a lot of us are in the same boat where like my son, he's my motivation behind my business too, and why I got into public health. And I don't know, it's just kind of fun to see that and really motivating. Like every day you're working hard for your kids and stuff. But yeah, Michelle just told me she's going to be homeschooling her kids. So you're busy. Like what's your week like these days? I know you see some patients and you have your kids at home.
Yeah, so it looks a little bit different week to week, but we are in a homeschool co-op and that meets every other Monday. So usually Mondays are either co-op or I'm just home with my kids. I treat patients 2 days a week. So I'm seeing patients on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that looks like driving a lot and meeting patients in their homes, and then Wednesdays and Fridays I'm also home with my kids, and so a lot of times I'm either like working like in the middle of things or they do a rest time and nap time every day. So I'm usually working during those times and then night times after they go to bed, also working a ton. So hoping that with a few additional team members that I can back out of treatment a little bit just so that I can be working more on a lot of those business things that I'm doing after bedtime and kind of move those to the daytime when I was having my treating hours, so I can get a little bit of my life back.
Mm-hmm. And going back to staffing again, I was going to ask, when you train your staff or you meet with them, do they come to your house then, or do you do it on Zoom or what?
We've done a little bit of everything. In the beginning, some of the training we did at my house, and then Our team meetings are usually at a public library, and try to do that kind of partway between where we live. And then we've had some Zoom meetings as well. I usually meet with my patient care coordinator via Zoom because we have a weekly call and we live like an hour apart. So, yeah, but the public libraries have come in clutch for us to, you can rent a room, um, and so we kind of have our own little space to do that.
Nice. Yeah. So, what do you think the future of your business is, or what are your goals? Um, yeah, I know your kids are kind of first, you've told me, and things like that. But yeah, what's your vision for the next couple of years as you can see it right now?
Yeah. So like I said, I'd like to cut back a little bit on patient caseload and just kind of stop taking any new patients and kind of finish out ones, or I kind of have my classics that I see like periodically and I would still continue to see them. But hopefully have a little bit more time to do some networking and working on just marketing and that kind of thing, as well as cultivating my team. And so I do plan to have a 2 hour meeting one on one with each staff person each week so that they, again, can get that mentorship. The people that I'm looking at hiring, I'm in the middle of interviews right now, don't have any pelvic experience. And so they are kind of coming in ground zero and will need kind of a big chunk of mentorship and just training at the beginning. And so hoping to get them kind of up and running in the next few months. And then I, like I said, we have the metro kind of split up right now. And so depending on if we get busier, I'd be interested in hiring even another person to just, again, decrease the commute times a little bit and kind of split up each person's radius. But I would love to have like coverage of every kind of corner of the actual metro. You know, we have like some like outlying suburbs that sometimes we'll get a call from, but like the main like ring of the Twin Cities, I would really love to have a practitioner available because we get calls from those areas and I usually am Googling trying to find them a clinic that's close to them because we don't travel in certain areas right now. And I really would love to have someone who could cover those areas. So that's kind of my vision is to have coverage in the Twin Cities so that I know that there is an in-home option for women in kind of each of those suburb areas.
How do you like to market your business?
Like I said, I have some fun with social media. I like to be on social media. And that at the beginning, a friend had told me who has done like a little bit of marketing work. He was like, don't plan to get any actual like business from your social media. Think of it as your like working bio. And so it was really helpful for me as I was getting started because I was like, oh, I'm getting like 2 likes on things and, you know, and no one's seeing my stuff. But then it did grow, and we have actually had more than a handful of people say that that's where they found us, whether or not that was like actually their first contact point or if they like just saw something and then they saw us again on social media and so they wrote that down. But it's fun that like people are actually finding us on there. And then of course with Facebook ads of this program that we're doing, people are really finding us on social media and probably clicking over and looking at our pages. And then practitioner relationships have been really huge for me. In the Twin Cities, we're really fortunate. We have a really great kind of birth community. So we have a lot of perinatal chiropractors, doulas, midwives that are really, I guess, kind of interconnected and just like doing good work. And so I have connected with a couple of different groups and some individual providers that were kind of referring back and forth with patients, which has been just really wonderful. And so I really like cultivating those relationships and figuring out like how we can better support one another's businesses and referring patients. And sometimes we're doing events. I have fun at workshops. I like doing workshops, but like something in me doesn't want to like set them up. Like I don't want to like spend the time and like I'm usually like dragging my feet on the way to the workshop. But once I'm there, I'm like, oh, this is so fun. And I'm like educating women and it feels really like invigorating to be there. But something about it, just like I'm like, ugh, I don't, I just like don't want to do it.
I know, I feel kind of the same way. Just like when I'm there, I have a lot of fun, but leading up to it, I'm like, why did I do this? Why did I schedule this? Oh, yeah. Good. It sounds like you have a pretty big and a good mixture of marketing tactics. So that's great. But do you have anything else you want to chat about today, Michelle?
I don't think so. Nothing that I can think of.
Yeah, so you'll have to go follow Michelle on Instagram. She's got a pretty great page and a lot of followers. How can they find you on Instagram or Facebook or online, whatever is best?
Yeah, so on Instagram, it's at moms.in.motion.pt. And then on Facebook, it's Dr. Michelle Wall.
I'll give her a follow, and hopefully, this was interesting to hear about a very successful mobile practice and a great mom and a great employer, everything. So, all right. Thanks so much
Well,
for coming on.
yeah, thanks so much for having me.